Chapter 15, Life in the Past. Here's a glossary of all of the words in the unit. Expressed means talked about or transmitted. Search for means to look for. Carving means shaping. So here, shaping a piece of wood, for example. Domesticated, which means adapted wild animals to farming, so they become used to humans. Settlements, small groups of houses. Conquered, means took control by force. Army, the military. Free men, people that were not slaves. Slaves, people that were the property of other people. Reconquered means took back. Powerful means to have lots of authority, lots of power. Prayed means to talk to God. Soon means in a short time. Rivals are enemies that compete. And unknown, people do not know what it is. Prehistory. Prehistory is the period in time before writing existed. We can imagine how prehistoric people lived based on clues from objects from those times, like tools, vases, decorations, and cave paintings. Nomads. At first, people moved from place to place, searching for food. They hunted animals, fished, and gathered plants to eat. They lived in caves where they painted on the walls. They made tools by carving stones and bones. They discovered how to use fire for cooking, heat, and light at night. They learned to wear animal skins to keep them warm. Settlements. People began to grow crops and domesticate animals. People started living in permanent settlements near rivers. Here's an example of a settlement. History. History is the period of time that began after writing was invented. When writing was invented, humans expressed their thoughts, beliefs, and lifestyles in written documents. Ancient history. Ancient history began with the first civilizations that used writing, like the Mesopotamians, Egyptians, Mayans, and Chinese. Roman civilization. This ancient civilization influenced Europe the most. It started in what we know today as Italy. The Romans conquered a large area with their strong army. This territory was called the Roman Empire. The empire was governed by an emperor. Roman influence. The Romans took their language, Latin, and their customs all over the empire. They built stone roads to connect cities together and aqueducts to take water into the cities. There were free men and slaves. Slaves had to work very hard for no money and were the property of their owners. Slaves built many of the famous monuments in the empire and worked in the crop fields in the country. Romans lived in cities that had markets, public baths, and many buildings. The cities had many temples because the Romans believed in many gods. There were also theatres, amphitheatres, and circuses for entertainment. The Middle Ages. The Middle Ages began in about 500 AD, when the Roman Empire was conquered by people that came from Eastern Europe. The Visigoths were one of these groups of people who created a kingdom in the Iberian Peninsula. 300 years later, the Muslims came from Africa and Asia and conquered most of the Iberian Peninsula. Two different cultures shared the peninsula. The Christians lived in the north, and the Muslims lived in the south. Christian and Muslim societies. Christian society was made up of different groups. Kings and noblemen were powerful and lived in castles. Peasants worked on the noblemen's lands, and monks lived in the monasteries. Muslim society was governed by a caliph. They spoke Arabic and their religion was Islam. They built many buildings like castles, public baths, palaces, and mosques. Here is the inside of a mosque. The Christians fought to take back the land in the south until they had all of it. This was called the Reconquest. Modern times. Modern times began around the year 1500, when the Spanish discovered America. The Spanish and other European nations explored the New World and traded with its inhabitants. They opened new sea routes, but became rivals for new land and power. There was lots of trade. Ships carried gold, silver, fabrics, and porcelains from the New World. They also took products that were completely new in Europe, like cocoa, tomatoes, and potatoes. During this time, people invented the printing press, which allowed them to make many copies of books and newspapers so more people could read them. Contemporary times. We live in contemporary times. This time started around the year 1800. There were many important inventions during this period. For example, the steam engine. This powerful machine created the beginning of industry. During the Industrial Revolution, cities filled with factories and many people moved from the country to find work. Electricity. This allowed people to see better in the dark and to more easily power machines. Train. This allowed lots of people to move between places more quickly than before. Advances of our era. So, examples of medical and health advances are vaccines, antibiotics, and X-rays. Technological advances are cars, airplanes, radio and the television, and social advances, schools, hospitals, and respect for human rights. Women in contemporary times. Historically, women did not have the same rights as men. During recent years, many countries have recognized their rights, and we are getting closer to equality. In many poorer countries, however, women do not have equality and sometimes do not even have the most fundamental human rights.